Hello, everyone. I am Mr. X Black. I am here to help you today. I know you watch videos before sleeping. So before that, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment. Where are you from? And what time are you watching? Let's relax with me at horror stories with rain sounds and black-green save energy. Have a good night. I want to tell you a story about a small town in Ohio, about empty gymnasiums that aren't really empty, about the sound of a basketball bouncing when no one is playing, about whispers that come from beneath the bleachers. I want to tell you about Emma Carter and what happened at Lincoln High. Some say small towns keep secrets better than big cities, that they bury them deeper, that they protect them longer. Lincoln, Ohio knows this truth all too well. Emma Carter never planned to return to small-town life. After 10 years coaching college basketball in Cincinnati, a messy divorce had left her desperate for change. When Lincoln High School posted an opening for a varsity basketball coach, she barely hesitated before applying. "It's just for a year or two," she told herself. "Just until I get back on my feet." The principal, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses named Walter Pearson, seemed oddly enthusiastic during her interview. "We're so pleased you applied, Miss Carter. Lincoln has struggled to maintain a basketball program since 1999. We've had difficulty keeping coaches." Emma nodded politely, assuming budget cuts or lack of interest. "The position comes with additional compensation," he continued, sliding a contract across his desk. The salary figure made Emma blink twice. "That's generous for a high school position," she said. Principal Pearson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We value athletics at Lincoln, basketball especially." Emma signed the contract that afternoon. Later, in the teacher's lounge, an older math teacher approached her. Mrs. Winters had taught at Lincoln for over 30 years. "You're the new basketball coach?" she asked, voice lowered. "That's right. Emma Carter." Mrs. Winters glanced around the empty room. "You know about the '99 team? State champions, right? I saw the trophy. And what happened after?" Emma shook her head. "Tommy Wilkins disappeared right after the championship game. Star player. Never found him. The team disbanded after that." "That's terrible," Emma said. Mrs. Winters leaned closer. "No one talks about it anymore. But every coach who's tried to restart the program has left within a year." She paused. "Some of them ran." Emma dismissed this as small-town dramatics. She'd always been practical. Facts over folklore, strategy over superstition. She would soon learn that practicality offers little protection against the darkness waiting beneath the bleachers of Lincoln High. Lincoln High's gymnasium was impressive for a small-town school. Polished hardwood floors, 6 basketball hoops, bleachers that could seat the entire student body. A glass case near the entrance held a single trophy, 1999 Ohio State basketball champions. Emma spent her first week reviewing old game footage and player files. The 1999 team had been remarkable, undefeated, with margins of victory that seemed almost impossible. They'd gone from perennial losers to state champions in a single season. The footage from the championship game showed a team playing with uncanny precision. Their movements were fluid, almost synchronized, and their eyes, Emma paused the video several times, seemed strangely unfocused, as if they were looking at something beyond the court. She began evening practices the following Monday. 8 boys showed up, hardly enough for a team. "Basketball's not popular anymore," explained Jason, a lanky sophomore. "Not since you know." "Since what?" The boys exchanged glances. "Since Tommy," said another boy, Marcus. "My older brother was on that team. He doesn't talk about it." Emma clapped her hands together. "Well, we're here to change that. Let's see what you've got." The practice was dismal. Missed shots, sloppy passes, no coordination. Emma ended early, feeling the weight of her task. "We'll get better," she assured them, not entirely believing it herself. That evening, she stayed late to organize the equipment room. The rain had started, a steady, persistent downpour that drummed against the gymnasium roof. Ohio autumns were like that, rain that could last for days. As she stacked the last of the balls in the storage bin, Emma froze. Bounce, bounce, bounce. The sound echoed through the empty gymnasium. The rhythmic bounce of a basketball against hardwood. Emma stepped back into the gym. Empty. The sound continued. Bounce, bounce, bounce. She walked slowly toward center court. The sound grew louder, more insistent. Yet no ball was visible. Hello, she called. Is someone here? The bouncing stopped abruptly. Silence, except for the rain. Then, faint but distinct, a whisper from beneath the bleachers. Coach. Emma ran to the bleachers, crouching to look underneath. Nothing but darkness. This is ridiculous, she muttered, straightening up. Just acoustics. Old buildings make sounds. As she turned to leave, the gymnasium lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Emma grabbed her things and hurried out, telling herself she was being foolish. She didn't notice the wet footprints on the court. Footprints too small for any of her players. Footprints that led from the bleachers to center court and then vanished. The next morning, Emma arrived early to find an elderly man mopping the gym floor. His name patch read Frank. Morning, she said. I'm Emma Carter, the new coach. Frank nodded without looking up. I know who you are. Do you always clean so early? Every morning since '75, he said. Except Sundays. Emma hesitated. I was here late last night. Heard some strange noises. Frank's mop stopped moving. What kind of noises? A basketball bouncing. But there was no one here. Frank resumed mopping, his movements more deliberate. Buildings make sounds. That's what I figured. And, she hesitated, feeling foolish. I thought I heard whispering. From under the bleachers. The mop stopped again. Frank turned to her, his weathered face grave. You should practice elsewhere for a while. Gym floor needs refinishing. It looks perfect to me. It's not safe, he insisted. We'll be careful, Emma said, confused by his intensity. Frank leaned on his mop. You don't understand. I was here in '99. I found the blood. Emma's skin prickled. Blood? What blood? Under the bleachers. After Tommy disappeared. Not much, just drops. Police said it wasn't enough to mean anything. Was there an investigation? Frank laughed humorlessly. Small town. Championship team. They called it a runaway. Case closed within a week. But you don't think he ran away. Frank looked toward the bleachers. I think something happened in this gym. Something that shouldn't have. He wheeled his bucket toward the exit. At the door, he paused. Don't stay after dark, coach. And whatever you do, don't answer if something calls your name. Despite Frank's warning, Emma continued evening practices. The rain persisted, 2 weeks of gray skies and steady downpour that seemed to drain the color from everything. Remarkably, the team began to improve. Their movements became more coordinated, their shots more accurate. After particularly good practices, Emma noticed their expressions growing distant, their responses delayed. She attributed it to fatigue. More students joined the team. By the third week, they had 12 players, enough for proper scrimmages. Emma was pleased but puzzled by the sudden interest. Words getting around, Jason explained. That we're getting good. During one practice, while demonstrating a defensive stance, Emma noticed a dark stain beneath the bleachers. She walked over, crouching to examine it. The wood was discolored, not with age, but with something darker. Something that had soaked into the grain. Coach, Marcus called. Everything okay? Emma straightened up. Fine. Just checking something. That night, she stayed late again. The storm outside had intensified, wind driving rain against the windows and sheets. As she packed her bag, the familiar sound began. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Emma stood motionless, listening. The sound came from center court. I know there's no one there, she said aloud, her voice swallowed by the empty gym. The bouncing continued, steady and rhythmic. Then a second sound joined it, the squeak of basketball shoes on hardwood. Back and forth, cutting across the court. The movement of players in a well-executed drill. Emma forced herself to walk toward center court. This isn't funny. If someone's playing a joke. The lights flickered, plunging the gym into darkness for 3 seconds before humming back to life. In that brief moment of darkness, Emma heard it clearly, breathing. Not one person, but many. The heavy breathing of athletes during intense play. When the lights returned, the gym was empty. But on the scoreboard, the digits had changed from their usual blank display. Home, 19, visitor, 99. Emma grabbed her phone, snapping a photo before the numbers reset to 0. She hurried from the gym, the sound of bouncing following her all the way to the parking lot. The next day, Emma skipped her morning classes and drove to the Lincoln Public Library. A friendly elderly librarian helped her locate microfilm records of the 1999 basketball season. The championship team, the librarian smiled. That was something special. Emma scrolled through article after article. The headlines told the story. Lincoln Lions begin season with surprise win. Lions continue unexpected streak. Unstoppable. Lincoln heads to state finals, state champions. Lincoln makes history. And then, 2 days later, local team missing. Basketball star Tommy Wilkins disappears. The article was brief. Tommy had last been seen celebrating with teammates after the championship game. He never returned home. Police suspected he might have run away, perhaps overwhelmed by scholarship offers and attention. A week later, a tiny follow-up piece mentioned the discovery of Tommy's car at the bus station. No security footage was available. The case remained open but inactive. Emma searched for more recent articles about the basketball program. Lincoln basketball program suspended indefinitely. 2000. Attempt to revive basketball meets resistance. 2005. Basketball coach resigns mid-season. Cites personal reasons. 2010. Another failed season. Is Lincoln basketball cursed? 2015. In all the championship photos, Tommy Wilkins was easy to spot. Number 19, tall and serious looking. His eyes seemed different from his teammates, clear and focused while theirs appeared strangely glazed. In the final championship photo, Emma noticed something she'd missed before. In the background, barely visible behind the celebrating team, stood the bleachers. And underneath them, a darkness that seemed deeper than shadow. A darkness with what looked like eyes. Emma enlarged the image, but it pixelated too much to see clearly. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching the team that night. Something that was still in the gymnasium. Emma decided to search the school's storage rooms for records from 1999. The athletic department kept old uniforms and equipment in a basement room that smelled of dust and mildew. Among stacked boxes, she found what she was looking for, a container labeled Basketball 1999. Inside were uniforms, playbooks, and a sealed envelope marked Lockers, Do Not Discard. The envelope contained small metal tags, the kind attached to locker keys. Each was labeled with a player's name. Emma searched through them until she found one marked Wilkins T. The boys' locker room had been renovated, but the original lockers remained. Emma found number 19 in the back corner. It had been repainted, the lock replaced, but it was undoubtedly Tommy's old locker. Using a maintenance key Frank had left in the equipment room, Emma opened it. Empty, as expected. She ran her hand along the interior, feeling nothing but smooth metal, until her fingers caught on something at the back. A seam that shouldn't be there. Pressing her fingernails into it, she pried open a false back. Behind it was a thin notebook, a journal bound in black leather. The first page bore Tommy's name in careful handwriting. Emma sat on a bench and began to read. The first entries were typical teenage concerns: classes, girls, basketball. Then, in November 1998, the tone changed. Coach brought in this guy today. Didn't give his name. Said he could help us win. We all laughed until he showed us. The next entry. We did the ritual like he showed us. Under the bleachers. Used Marcus's blood since he volunteered. Nothing happened at first. Then during practice, everything changed. I could see the plays before they happened. We all could. Coach says we don't talk about the ritual. ever. Entries described increasingly impossible feats during games. Players making shots with their eyes closed, knowing exactly where teammates would be without looking. Then, in January, something's wrong. The others don't see it. Their eyes are changing. After games, they don't remember things. I try to talk to coach, but he says it's just championship pressure. I'm scared. I think whatever we called up is taking something from us. The final entry dated the night of the championship game. We won. Everyone's celebrating but me. I can feel it watching me. It wants payment. Coach says the blood offerings aren't enough anymore. It wants more. I found out what happened to the 1957 team. They won state too. Then their captain vanished. Same thing in 1978. I think I'm next. I've told Marcus I'm leaving town tonight. If anyone reads this, do not restart the team. It will come back. It needs the game. It feeds on it somehow. I can hear them coming. They're outside my car now. My teammates. But it's not them anymore. The journal ended there. Emma closed it with shaking hands, suddenly aware of how quiet the school had become, how dark it was outside, how alone she was. From the gymnasium above, she heard it. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Emma canceled practice the next day, claiming illness. She spent the hours researching Lincoln's basketball history. The pattern was undeniable. In 1957, a mediocre team had suddenly become exceptional, winning the state championship before their captain disappeared. In 1978, the same story. Unexpected success followed by the unexplained disappearance of a star player. And always, the program would collapse afterward, only to be revived years later when the events had faded from memory. Emma's players began texting her, asking when practice would resume. Their messages seemed odd, too intense, too focused on returning to the gym. Jason's texts were particularly concerning. We need to practice, coach. The court is waiting. It's hungry. When Emma didn't respond, they started appearing outside her apartment. She would see them standing in the rain, watching her windows. Not approaching, just watching. Their stillness was unnatural. After 2 days, Emma knew she had to face them. She scheduled practice for Friday evening. 16 players showed up, more than had ever attended before. Some she didn't recognize as students. All wore the same blank expression. Line up, she instructed, trying to keep her voice steady. They moved with unsettling synchronization, forming a perfect line at center court. I need to understand what's happening, Emma said. I found Tommy's journal. The players remained silent, unmoving. What happened in 1999? What did the team do? Jason stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice was different, deeper, with an odd resonance. They invited it in, like the team before them, like we have now. Invited what? The darkness under the bleachers. It was always here, sleeping in the spaces beneath. They woke it with blood and desperation. It gave them what they wanted, and took Tommy in return, Emma said. Jason smiled. The expression was wrong on his young face. Too old, too knowing. It takes one every time. A fair exchange. Victory for sacrifice. And now it's awake again. We've been feeding it. Small offerings at first, blood, pain, time. But it grows hungry for more. Jason's eyes darkened until they were entirely black. It remembers you, coach. From before. Emma stepped back. I've never been here before. Not you. The position. The coach. The one who guides the sacrifice. The other players began to move, spreading out across the court, surrounding her. The others ran. Jason continued. The other coaches. They left when they understood. But you can't run from it. It follows. It waits. It finds you in empty gyms, in the sound of a bouncing ball, in the whispers under the bleachers. Emma backed toward the door. Practice is over. Everyone go home. None of them moved. It's chosen already, Jason said. Marcus has been selected. The youngest always tastes the sweetest. Marcus stood expressionless, his eyes now black like Jason's. This is insane, Emma said. You're talking about murder. Sacrifice, Jason corrected. The darkness must be fed if we want to win. You understand winning, don't you, coach? The cost of greatness. Emma reached the door. Practice is canceled. I'm calling your parents. Parents can't help. Jason smiled. The whole town knows. Why do you think they hired you, an outsider? Someone expendable if things go wrong. The lights flickered. In the momentary darkness, Emma felt something brush past her, something cold and damp that smelled of rot and stagnant water. When the lights returned, the players were arranged in a circle at center court. In their midst was a dark stain spreading across the hardwood. Emma ran. Emma drove straight to Principal Pearson's house. He opened the door still wearing his work clothes, unsurprised by her late visit. You know, she accused, about the basketball team, about what happened to Tommy. Pearson sighed, stepping aside to let her in. Come inside, Coach Carter. In his living room, Emma found 3 other men, Frank the custodian, Sheriff Mills, and an elderly man introduced as former Coach Harmon. We've been expecting you, Harmon said. They all figure it out eventually. What is happening to my players? Emma demanded. The men exchanged glances. Sheriff Mills spoke first. It's been in the gymnasium since the school was built. Something old. Most times it sleeps. But every 20 years or so, it wakes hungry. In '57, we didn't understand, Harmon added. We thought the team was just having a miracle season. Then our captain vanished the night we won state. In '78, I was assistant coach, Pearson said. We tried to stop it, but it had already taken hold of the team. We couldn't save Raymond. And Tommy in '99, Emma finished. Frank nodded. After that, we made sure the basketball program stayed dormant. Until the school board overruled us. They wanted the prestige back. The championships. So you hired me, Emma said bitterly. An outsider who wouldn't know the history. We hoped it was gone, Pearson insisted. It's been 25 years, not 20. We thought maybe. It's not gone. It's in my players now. They're planning to sacrifice Marcus. Sheriff Mills stood up. We can't let that happen again. How do we stop it? Emma asked. Harmon shook his head. We've tried everything. Salt lines. Prayers. Burning sage. Nothing works once it's taken hold. There must be something, Emma insisted. Some way to break its connection to the team, to the gym. Frank cleared his throat. There might be. In '99, when we were cleaning up the blood, I found marks under the bleachers, carved into the wood. Symbols. A ritual site, Harmon murmured. If we destroy it, Emma began. It could break the connection, Pearson finished. Or make it angry. Emma stood up. I won't let it take one of my players. We're going to end this tonight. They arrived at the school past midnight. The rain had finally stopped, leaving an unnatural stillness in the air. The gymnasium lights were on despite the late hour. I turned those off myself, Frank said, his voice shaking. Inside, they found the team. All 16 players stood in formation on the court, perfectly still. At center court lay Marcus, conscious but unmoving, his eyes wide with terror. Jason stepped forward when they entered. His eyes were completely black now, his movements fluid but wrong, like a puppet controlled by unseen strings. You shouldn't have come back, coach, he said, but the voice wasn't his anymore. Let him go, Emma demanded, pointing to Marcus. The sacrifice has been prepared. The vessel is ready. Sheriff Mills moved forward, hand on his holster. This ends now, son. Jason smiled, the expression inhuman on his face. Nothing ends. The game continues. Always. The other players began to move, spreading out to block the exits. The bleachers, Emma whispered to Frank. Show me the marks. They edged along the wall toward the bleachers while Pearson and Sheriff Mills distracted the players. Harmon stood frozen by the door, terror evident on his face. Under the bleachers, Frank shone his flashlight on the support beams. There, carved into the ancient wood, were symbols Emma didn't recognize, curved lines and angular shapes that seemed to shift under direct light. These are it, Frank confirmed. They were bleeding when I found them in '99, like the wood itself was wounded. Emma touched one of the symbols. The wood felt warm, pulsing faintly like something alive. "We need to destroy them," she said. "All of them." From the court came a sudden cry. Emma peered out to see Sheriff Mills on the floor, Jason standing over him. The other players had surrounded Pearson and Harmon. "We need time," Emma told Frank. She stepped out from under the bleachers. "Jason," she called, "this isn't you. None of you want this." Jason turned to her, head tilting at an impossible angle. "Jason is merely a vessel now, as you will be. You can't take Marcus," Emma said, walking slowly toward center court. "Take me instead." The players went still. Jason straightened, studying her with those black eyes. "The coach offers herself," he said, voice resonating unnaturally in the gym. "A rare sacrifice." From beneath the bleachers came the sound of Frank working, the scrape of metal against wood as he tried to destroy the symbols. "I know what you are," Emma continued, buying time. "You feed on their desire to win, their desperation, their ambition. I give them what they want," Jason replied. "Victory, perfection. I ask only a small price." "A life isn't a small price." Jason smiled. "One life for glory? Many would consider it fair." Behind her, Emma heard Frank's desperate scraping growing louder. The players began to notice, turning toward the sound. "Now!" Emma shouted. Frank emerged from beneath the bleachers, holding a small canister. "Gasoline," he explained, splashing it across the wooden bleachers. From the maintenance shed, the players surged forward as one, but Sheriff Mills had recovered, drawing his weapon. "Stay back," he ordered. Emma grabbed a lighter from her pocket, the one she'd borrowed from Pearson's house. "This ends now. You can't destroy it," Jason said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "It's part of the school, part of the town. We'll see about that," Emma said, flicking the lighter. The flame caught instantly, racing up the gasoline-soaked wood. The bleachers began to burn, smoke filling the gymnasium. The players cried out, a unified sound of rage and pain. Jason fell to his knees, clutching his head. One by one, the others collapsed as well. "Get them out," Emma shouted to Pearson and Mills. "Get everyone out." As they dragged the unconscious players from the gym, Emma turned back to the burning bleachers. Through the flames, she could see the symbols blackening, the wood cracking and splitting, and beneath them, movement. Something shifting in a darkness deeper than the smoke. Something watching her with hatred. "It's over," she told it. "Find somewhere else to feed." The fire alarm blared. Sprinklers activated, but the fire had caught hold, spreading rapidly across the old wood. Emma helped Frank toward the exit, glancing back one last time as the gym filled with smoke. Through the haze, she saw the scoreboard flicker to life. Home, 20 visitor, 24. Then the ceiling began to collapse, and Emma ran. The Lincoln High Gymnasium burned to the ground that night. The official report cited faulty wiring, a convenient explanation that the town readily accepted. No one mentioned the symbols under the bleachers or the darkness that had fed there. The players recovered slowly. Most remembered nothing of that night or the practices leading up to it. Their eyes returned to normal. Their movements became their own again. Marcus, who had come closest to being sacrificed, transferred to another school. Emma couldn't blame him. The basketball program was suspended indefinitely, this time with the full support of the school board. Emma gave her notice, but agreed to finish the school year teaching physical education. The classes were held outside or in the cafeteria, far from the gymnasium's charred remains. On her last day in Lincoln, Emma visited the construction site, where workers were clearing debris to rebuild the gym. A chain-link fence surrounded the area, but she found a gap large enough to slip through. The basement level remained partially intact, concrete walls blackened but standing. Emma made her way carefully across the rubble, drawn to the far corner where the bleachers had stood. Nothing remained of the wooden structures, just ash and twisted metal supports. The symbols had burned away completely. As she turned to leave, Emma froze. From somewhere in the ruins came a sound that stopped her heart. Bounce, bounce, bounce. the unmistakable rhythm of a basketball against hardwood. But there was no floor left, only concrete and ash. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Emma ran. Behind her, barely audible over the rain that had begun to fall again, came a whisper. "See you in 20 years, coach." She never returned to Lincoln, Ohio. But sometimes, alone in her apartment in Cincinnati, Emma wakes to the sound of a basketball bouncing in an empty room. And she knows it's still out there, still hungry, still waiting. Because darkness like that doesn't die. It merely sleeps. And sooner or later, someone always wakes it up again.